Good morning. Welcome to a lesson on To Autumn. Good morning. Welcome to a lesson on To Autumn by John Keats. Fantastic poem. Really excited to get going. So, first of all, little mind map in your books, on paper, however you're doing this. What's your favourite season and why? Is it spring? Is it summer? Is it autumn? Is it winter? I think mine is probably summer. Holidays, sunshine. Getting out, but obviously the irony of that is it is summer and we can't do any of those things. We can sunbathe for 10 minutes a day if we're lucky and we've got the space. So things are a bit different at the moment. But yes, so just pause the video please and quick mind map your own thoughts about seasons. Okay, John Keats, pictured up there. Born 1785 to 1821, was a romantic poet. I'll explain that more in a minute. He died only 25, so it's very, very young, of tuberculosis. So it's a nasty lung disease. And his reputation actually, it grew much more after he died. I mean, he was only 25. He hadn't had much time to become famous. So it's quite tragic, really, that he didn't live to see the acclaim, the fame that he got. And his poetry is often characterised by very sensual imagery. So what we mean by that is literally poems about things you can see, but touch and smell and taste. And it's that kind of language that we're going to be exploring. He wrote this poem after a countryside walk, very jealous, because obviously we can't do that anymore. And he was really excited and really moved by what he saw and really enjoyed himself. So he chose to write a poem, which is lovely, actually. I don't think we really do that anymore. It's, I suppose, the 18th century equivalent of an Instagram post, but there's a bit more joy to it there. A romantic poet, excuse my use of PowerPoint, it's an artistic movement. It's not lovey-dovey. A romantic poem is a poem characterised by a love of nature and an appreciation for its power and its beauty, and often this idea that by understanding nature you understand yourself and God and the world a little bit more. So the influence of the senses is quite common as well, and personal emotion. Big emotional poems, big passionate poems from romantic poets. And it's about getting to this deeper meaning of life through an understanding of nature. So it is technically an ode. What you need to know is basically that means it's a lyrical stanza. The bit that you would write down in your notes now, please, is this bit in red here. It's praising or glorifying an event or an individual, describing nature intellectually as well as emotionally. And what I want you to do now is go and YouTube Ode to Joy, for example, by Beethoven. Is a massive piece of music all about joy, and it's got one of the most famous riffs, basically, in musical history. So it's a common way to celebrate something, essentially, when you write an ode or make a piece of music and name it an ode. So go and YouTube the Ode to Joy and enjoy that, because it's a fantastic bit of music. Now I'm going to read the poem. Season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him, how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatch eaves run, to bend with apples the moss cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells with a sweet kernel, to set budding more, and still more, later flowers for the bees, until they think warm days will never cease, for summer has o'erbrimmed their clammy cells. Who hath not seen thee oft at midnight amid thy store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor, thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep, drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swathe and all its twinned flowers. And sometimes like a gleaner thou dost keep steady thy laden head across a brook, or by a cider press with a patient look thou watchest the last oozings, hours by hours. Where are the songs of spring? Aye, where are they? Think not of them, thou hast thy music too, while barred clouds bloom the soft dying day and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue. Then in a wailful choir the small gnats mourn among the river sallows, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies, and full-grown lambs loud bleat from hilly bourne, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft the red-breast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. A really beautiful poem, and there's so much imagery in this, and we'll try and break it down. So the first section, obviously I've split this up for ease of understanding, is literally a celebration of autumn. Season of mist, mellow fruitfulness, close bosom friend of the maturing sun, conspiring with him how to load and bless with fruit the vines that round the thatched eaves run. So you've got this idea, autumn is an ending. It is the end of summer and winter is on the horizon. So it isn't necessarily a positive time, but because it's also the time that you harvest. I mean, you may have gone to harvest festivals, assemblies at school. It's often a big part of certain religions as well. And it's a part of an agricultural society, which is what we are built on in Britain. So you've got the sun maturing. So it's older. By the way, never refer to anybody as maturing if you're referring to their age. Probably not going to go down very well. But actually, it's quite a positive word. You want, for example, mature cheese. You want maturity as a sign of experience, not a sign of age. So the sun is knowledgeable, the sun is experienced. It's a positive way of pointing out that the sun's been doing a lot of work over the summer, being the sun. And then you've got this image of abundance. Things are everywhere. Things are being harvested. So you've got things like, so blessing with fruit, vines. So that would be things like grapes, and fruitfulness. Literally, there's lots around. And so it's almost like nature is providing. The sun is conspiring here. The sun is creating a lot. Harvest is coming. So there's more here. To bend with apples the moss cottage trees, and fill all fruit with ripeness to the core, to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells with the sweet kernel, to set budding more. So you've got so much fruit. The apples are actually bending the trees. You've got all fruit is going to be perfectly ripe to the middle. Not one piece of fruit is going to be wrong. Gourds are getting bigger. Gourds are kind of like, they're in the same family as pumpkins. They plump hazel shells, so everything's growing and it's all sweet as well. Notice here, there's nothing bitter, there's nothing nasty, and everything's going to bud more. Nature is overflowing. Everything's ready, everything's alive. And also you've got this beautiful little image, the mossed cottage trees. So you've got this image of a beautiful English countryside cottage. You know, think the sort of places you see around the downs. It's all very idyllic, it's all very perfect. And we've got more, and still more things are growing. Later flowers for the bees. So the bees still get all their flowers. That's their production until they think warm days will never cease. They feel like the summer is going to go on forever, and the autumn is going to go on forever, that it's never going to get cold. Winter will never come. And summer has overbrimmed their clammy self. Summer has produced this abundance, and that is the joy of summer. And you've got this idea that with the bees, I think, as well, of a circle of life. I mean, this is, 2020, we know that bees are an important part of agriculture and production, but even then there's this image of a kind of circle of life, of the bees need the flowers to pollinate the plants, and people have understood that for a long time. So their joy in the flowers is just as important as our joy in the food here. And then this is the next stanza. He starts addressing autumn directly, which is really interesting. He says, "Who has not seen thee oft amid thy store?" So this abundance, we all know what it is. He recognises it. And then if you ever go looking for it, sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a granary floor. So a granary would probably be somewhere you would take grains such as wheat or hops and barley to dry them out before they would be processed in whatever form was necessary. And still autumn is there. Autumn is there to supervise that harvest. Autumn becomes a person at this point, and it is surrounded by food and abundance again. Thy hair soft lifted by the winnowing wind, or on a half-reaped furrow sound asleep. So you've still got this relaxation, this beautiful sort of lazy autumn afternoon, and there's some beautiful alliteration here. The winnowing wind is this beautiful soft image of a light breeze. So we're not into the cold winds of winter, although often summer isn't very windy if you're lucky. It's just this beautiful light wind, sort of gentle presence. And also, I think it's important to note, at this point, autumn and nature have been feminized. I'm almost certain this is not a man, thy hair soft lifted. All of a sudden, autumn is this beautiful kind of spirit, this beautiful woman blessing things, making them grow, sort of like a queen of harvest. And if you've been watching a lot of these videos and studying nature poetry, it's always feminized. It's always put as a woman. And you have to wonder, is that because a lot of the poems we study in English are written by men? And there's an element of misogyny there, that they're putting women in their place? I don't know. Or is it this image of women as creator? It's an interesting way to write. I'm not necessarily criticizing it, but just look out for it. Every time you see the presentation of nature, who's it associated with? Is it men or is it women? Because those stereotypes are never helpful necessarily. And it's, I think, quite common for male poets to do that, or at least it was in the sort of 18th, 19th century that we study. Just a little side note. So, autumn again is drowsed with the fume of poppies, while thy hook spares the next swath and all its twin flowers, and sometimes, like a gleaner, thou dost keep steady thy laden head across the brook. So again, it's this peaceful, pleasant, relaxed, almost quite laissez-faire attitude. Autumn's quite tired, it's been making all this fruit, but it's all beautiful. It's drowsy. It's not exhausted, it's drowsy, it's relaxed. And it's producing, and again, we've got these flowers, and sometimes it just hangs out at a brook. So it's another word for a small river or a small kind of rivery amount of water. I don't know the geography terms, but interestingly, again, that's a very idyllic image. It's not sitting by a raging river. It's not sat by a reservoir or a pond. It's a brook associated with, the sound of trickling water. In Shakespeare's, I think it's As You Like It, or well, one of Shakespeare's plays anyway, there's a speech about the beauty of nature. It's the All the World's a Stage speech, and it's that play, and it's all about, there's this line, books in brooks, and sermons in trees and songs. And anyway, my point there is supposed to be that the brook is this particularly idyllic view of nature, and it brings to mind that kind of sound. Or by a cider press. So this is production again, with a patient look. Autumn, there's no urgency in autumn. Everything will be what it's supposed to be. And there's a real sort of, we've got this covered. There's a comfort in that, which is possibly a little inaccurate, because of course at harvest time, you've not got that long to harvest before the winter hits, and to make sure your fruit or vegetables are not going to go off. They've all got to be preserved. And cider obviously is one way of preserving apples. And now watches the last oozings hours by hours. So this patient look, it's still quiet and still relaxed. But it's starting to change the tone of this stanza, the last oozings. So while the word oozing is more sensory language about literally the liquid oozing out of the apples, and it's still about this abundance and this presence of so much food, it's the last oozings. So all of a sudden, things are coming to an end. They're sort of fading away a little bit, and hours by hours reminds us for the first time of time. There was no time in any of the other stanzas. It was an unending summer. The bees thought it would never end. Autumn was taking a snooze by the river, by the brook. So all of a sudden, things are sort of starting to change, and Keats is starting to think about the end of autumn and what that means. So he's now questioning, he's getting a bit melancholy. Where are the songs of spring? Spring, I'm going to encourage you all to listen to a song later. It's all gone. And spring is beautiful. Spring is when everything is coming alive. And so he's thinking, well, what about them? But he's saying, no, it's okay. Think not of them. Thou hast thy music too. Autumn has its own beauty. And that's what he's sort of arguing for after this countryside walk he's taken. Is autumn is just as beautiful as the more obvious seasons, really. Spring and summer get all the credit almost, because they're when everything's growing. So he's really fighting for autumn here. While barred clouds bloom the soft dying day and touch the stubble plains with rosy hue. So again, this is the third stanza now. Things are sort of starting to come to an end. He's starting to accept that. The day is dying, but it's soft dying. So it's fading gently. It's not violent, it's not dramatic, but it is an end. The stubble plains is a brilliant image. What I think he's saying is, when you cut wheat or barley, obviously really important crops, you're always left with a small stalk, which is very, very hard and stubbly. So that's telling me that if the plains are all stubbly, then everything's been harvested. It's all gone now, which is a positive, but there is none of this abundance because it's all stored away. But you've still got this rosy hue. Okay, you've still got this beautiful sunset. You could think of the idea of rose-tinted glasses. It's quite a romantic image as well, a lovey-dovey romantic image. But it's still a beautiful description of a sunset here. So even though things are ending, there's still beauty. Then, in a wailful choir, the small gnats mourn among the river sallows, borne aloft or sinking as the light wind lives or dies. This is the first kind of overtly negative image. So gnats, obviously thriving, those little horrible midgy things that get near you if you're by water in the summer, they're going to die off because it's not going to be warm enough for them. So it's a wailful choir. They're literally almost singing a sad song, and they're mourning as if something has died, which in this case it has really. Autumn has come, and so the joy of it is almost ruined by the fact that some things won't survive the rest of the year. And the light wind lives or dies. So nature is personified again. The wind is a thing that can live or die. But we've gone from that beautiful winnowing wind and that very light breeze to it lives or dies and we don't know. And he's reminding us we can't know nature. You can't know nature. And that's a very romantic poet stereotype, as it were. You can't know nature. You can't understand nature, and you shouldn't expect to as well. So here nature is going back to doing what it's doing, which is sometimes dying, not saving everybody, being a little bit cruel, actually. And full-grown lambs, loud bleat from hilly bourne, hedge crickets sing, and now with treble soft, the redbreast whistles from a garden croft, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. So, I don't know if I'm being a bit harsh with this, but full-grown lambs, to me, tells us that they're ready for slaughter as well. Because, of course, baby lambs born in the spring, lambs are animals grown for food, generally speaking. So they're not beautiful, adorable little Easter creatures anymore. They are ready for slaughter. And it's quite, if your head goes there, it's quite violent. It's quite jarring. We've gone from all this beautiful image of abundance to the reminder that the purpose of this is to eat and to kill in some senses. I wonder if you've got the redbreast whistles. Now, robins, you always get them on Christmas cards. They're animals that do survive quite well in winter, and they don't go anywhere either. So it's a reminder again, there's a symbol there of winter is coming. It's not necessarily negative, it's still whistling, but it needs to be remembered that we're getting this imagery coming in. He's aware that this is going to end, and that to some extent there is death in the world. And gathering swallows twitter in skies. So swallows, just like in as imperceptibly as grief, with the birds flying away, swallows are gathering to leave. They fly south for the winter. So the swallows are leaving now because it's no longer a place for them. And so that's a real end. Instead of nature being here, being a part of everything, being part of the world, the swallows are leaving. And so it's quite a melancholy, quite a sad ending, really. It's the reminder that things end, that autumn may have been beautiful, summer may have been beautiful, but they must naturally give way. And so there's an acceptance that we can't control that any more than the animals can control whether or not they live or die, or those gnats are going to survive. It's a beautiful ending. It's quite sad, but it's also quite positive because they're going on to live. They're just not able to do it in this really, really cold country. So autumn has a serious amount of significance. The end of summer means the coming of winter. Winter is death. That's a basic premise. I mean, we've read lots of poems, and you will read lots of poems that contradict that. The prelude is about winter and is about how amazing it was. So it very much depends on your own perspective. Autumn is beautiful. Autumn is gorgeous. Is it a fading beauty? Is it a beauty that reminds us, all those beautiful orange leaves remind us it's going to get cold, it's going to get icy, and it's going to get dark? Or can we see beauty in the time that it is also a time of harvest and a time of abundance, and when things grow again? And that's a decision for you to make as an individual, how you choose to see it. And I think Keats here is talking about the beauty and the abundance of nature, but it's still in the back of his mind that there is an ending coming, however much he actually really loves this season. So the tone of the poem, it really helps us explore what the poet's trying to get the audience to feel. So the first stanza, and these are notes you should be making specifically on your copies, the first stanza is full of joy and wonder. Nature offers everything to humanity. Nature brings us life. It's our close bosom friend. Apples are literally breaking the trees. There's so much. The ground is swelling. The hazel shells are plumped. It's all this beautiful sensory language. Plumped, clammy, over-brimmed. Things are almost, there's too much. It's falling out. And so all of that very sensual, very sensory language is about everything becoming perfect. The sun matures like a fine wine, for example. And everything is ripe to the core. That's a really nice phrase there. That it's perfect. It's everywhere. It's perfect, and there's loads of it. He starts addressing autumn directly here as this beautiful woman, and I've sort of talked about the fact that that's a very common image, is nature as woman, which I think is quite positive. And it's more appreciation in this stanza of the offerings of nature, but things are starting to fade. So the apples have been made into cider and now we're out. The last oozings are going hours by hours. If they're on a granary floor, it means it's been harvested and it's being dried and it's being processed, but it's no longer living. Autumn's getting drowsy, getting tired as well. It's everywhere, but it is sort of becoming, it's both relaxed and maybe a little bit done. It's, you've got to steady your head, but it's still this beautiful image of nature, of water as well, the oozings of the cider, you're by a brook, all these beautiful flowers and this soft wind. So there's still not the harshness of winter, but hours by hours, time is passing, and that's the difference here. And then this final stanza, there is a sadness to this stanza. Where are the songs of spring? Things have ended. He's reminding himself that all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but the previous season's ended, so this one's going to as well. And the end of summer does mean winter's coming. It means a certain amount of death, and naturally so. It's not, I mean, depression is quite a modern way of putting it, but it's not fun winter a lot of the time. It's fun to stay in and watch Elf 5 times, but it's cold and it's dark and you don't always get a lot of sunlight. And Keats is reflecting on his own humanity here. The gnats aren't going to survive. The small gnats are going to mourn. The lambs are going to be harvested. The swallows are going to leave. And for him, as a romantic poet, he's taking that ending of things in nature and reminding himself that it's the same for humanity. It's the same for us mere mortals. The winter is inevitable, and so, to some extent, is death. It's a really beautiful, very positive poem, so I don't want the overall idea to be it's really depressing, he's thinking about death. But it does force him to reflect on his own humanity and the beauty of it as well. I think that's really, really important to understand, that in understanding the joy and the abundance and the beauty of nature, it's leading Keats to an understanding of how everything is still subject to these laws. No matter what religious beliefs he did or didn't have, everything still has to follow natural law, which is that things live and things die. So the key ideas of this poem are about the beauty and abundance of life and nature. But a natural process of aging, of maturing, of growing, it does lead to death. Death is, however, a part of life. He's not really regretful of it. He's just reminding himself of it. And you've got this idea of life as binary opposites. You've got all this joy at the start of the poem, but we do suffer at the end. Life and death, abundance and loss. We've got all these apples, but now they've all been made into cider. There's no more apples, for example. So there's this circle of life. Everything ends, but there's a joy in that. There's a joy in understanding that that's the way life works and appreciating life and nature while you have the opportunity as well. So it's a poem full of all this language. I hope that's been really helpful. Hopefully one day soon, when they lift this lockdown, you'll all be able to take a walk and write a poem yourself. I'd like to recommend everybody goes and listens to the autumn section of Vivaldi's The Four Seasons, which is all over YouTube. Just a beautiful piece of music. But if you do, just as an added extra, listen to it. Think about how it represents this idea of ending and beauty. And maybe, if you're so inclined, listen to the other spring and summer and winter as well, because they're gorgeous pieces of music. But it's really important to remember culturally that people like Keats and Wordsworth and Dickinson aren't the only people to write about nature. I think musicians do it in a very different way, but with all the same ideas. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed that.